We create birthday cards to celebrate our loved ones and to make them feel extra special. A handmade card is the perfect way to show that we care about them on their special day. But what about the days when a birthday springs around the corner and we don't have a lot of time to create a birthday card? So we've compiled a video list of 10 easy birthday cards to make in no time. We've divided this up based on different crafting styles and tool availability to make this list as inclusive as possible. Easy for beginners, minimal tools needed. Let's start with some beginner-friendly options that require minimal tools. This is great if you're just starting out on your card making journey, are traveling with limited supplies, or just need to create a quick card on the go. 1 minute last cards with Peekaboo mini stamping. First up, we have this adorable Peekaboo mini stamping technique by Amber Davis. She uses a mini delight stamp set to create cute little critters peeking out from behind geometric shapes. This is a fun way to get creative with basic stamping and freehand drawing.
I'm going to move on to Shades of Love. This is very similar to Shades of Friendship, except for instead of a honeycomb pattern, this one is made of squares. As always, all of the supplies are listed in the description down below, and while you're there, give it a like and subscribe. So as you saw, this technique works great with your dye inks. You would get a different look if you tried this with your pigment inks. The dye inks will absorb into the paper, whereas your pigment inks are going to sit more on top of the surface, and you can layer pigment inks a little bit easier without this transparent peekaboo effect because they're more of an opaque ink. So it's definitely something you could try. I would expect that you would get a different look. I'm going to move on to Mini Delight Birthday Love. I thought the balloon stamps would be perfect to show some of that background and create that peekaboo effect. So I'll use Wisteria first up at the top, and I will stamp this twice as well. Now I was thinking that I wasn't going to use the outline initially, but since my sentiment was going to be in black, I really felt like I needed to add the outline to this stamp. So normally I would stamp the outline image first and then come in with the solid image, but you can see that it really doesn't make too much difference whether or not you start with the solid or the outline stamp. Now, I was a little worried that the overlap of the green and the pink would cause a very brown color, but I went for it anyway. You can see that I'm overlapping it quite a bit, and I don't think that it turned too brown, the mixing of the green and the pink ink, even though they're complementary colors. I'll stamp the sentiment, which comes with the Birthday Love mini stamp set. Here you can see that the pink and the green didn't mix too much, and I was pleasantly surprised it didn't cause brown. I have the Altenew Fine Liner 01 pen, and I'm just going to add some little streamers here coming down from the balloons. I'll stop when I get to the sentiment and pick up the line after the word rather than going straight through it. So really simple card, you guys. There's no masking, there's no die cutting. There's very minimal layer stamping, so these are cards that you can get done quickly. The fact that you have a ton of white space left over means that they're also quick and efficient because you're not having to fill the entire card.
2. How to use blended backgrounds for card making. Next, we have a beautiful technique from Therese Calvird. She demonstrates how to create stunning backgrounds using panel ink blending and die cutting. Simply ink blend a panel, die cut into shapes, then stamp sentiments onto them. Easy and impactful.
And I'm going to be using this featured sentiments die set on both my cards today. And seriously, these dies couldn't have come at a better time because with the new ink blending tool from Altenew, I'm blending everything. I am absolutely loving it. I have never been able to blend very smoothly, never get those smooth transitions, and this tool makes it a breeze. And what happens is I can do like a big background like this in no time at all and in these really pretty colors. So basically I can create my own gradient cardstock in whatever colors I want. I can mix colors, I can use one color, I can blend them. I'm just having a ball with it. But if you're anything like me, I make these backgrounds and then I look at them and think, oh, what am I going to do now? It looks so pretty. And I don't want to cut it, but I do. I'm going to use it. I'm getting much better at using things as I create them now and not leaving a lot of UFOs. unfinished projects, UFPs, objects, unfinished objects lying around. So I have the featured sentiments die set, and it's brilliant. Like, I put a sentiment pretty much on every card I make, and I do like to pop them up and I cut them out. These are unique in that they have rounded corners. There's 2 different sizes within the set, and when I say sizes, I mean widths. So there's a wider one. I just decided to choose all the narrow ones for this first project here. So initially I was just going to do the blues, but I thought it'd be nice to add some green. So I'm using like an analogous colour palette today. So these are colours that are beside themselves. But they're beside themselves. No, they're beside each other on the colour wheel. And you can choose anywhere from 3 to 5 colours that sit beside each other on the colour wheel, and you'll find that you'll get some really brilliant sort of colour combinations. So have a look at a colour wheel. You can just Google one and have a look online. You don't have to have like a physical version in your hand, and create something with colours that are beside each other, not beside themselves. So I did some tone on tone stamping, and I thought it'd be perfect to use the Sentiment Strips 2 stamp set here. And basically I just chose like happy birthday kind of style sentiments, and ones that fitted on each of the sentiment strips from the die cuts. And then I've got a piece of 80-pound Nina cardstock here, and I'm basically laying out and adhering all of my sentiments down and just sort of staggering them so that like kind of no 2 sentiments are beside each other that are too similar, that what am I saying? Not too similar. No 2 sentiments that are the same are beside each other. Just mixing up the colours and the shades of colours here as well, and trying to leave like a similar gap between all of them. And I did eyeball it. The beauty of using a separate piece of cardstock here as opposed to working directly on my card front is I can cut it down at the end to the size I want. Like, so say it doesn't fit perfectly, I don't have to space it all out to begin with, if that makes sense. It was just easier for me to do it this way. So, and I did have to do that. I did have to cut the top off a little bit just to even it out. And then all I had to do then was actually trim a little piece off my top fold card as well, so that they were exactly the same size. And then I can add my sentiment panel directly to the card front. And I'll just use some glue tape to do that. I have the happy birthday die here. This has been die cut from some jet black cardstock and popped up on some fun foam. I actually made this for another project and didn't use it, so I thought it was the perfect time to bring this in. I just wanted something bold. I mean, I could have just left the card as it was, but I wanted something like a birthday bold sentiment to use. And I simply attached that over top with some matte medium. I cut away the happy from the birthday, and I just did that with a pair of scissors and kind of visualized where the letters would have been, where they were joined, and it seemed to work really well. And to add the tittle here, I've used one of the Greenfields enamel dots and added a happy from the Hello and Hugs stamp set.
Number 3. Beautiful quick and easy floral background. Therese also shows us a quick and easy floral background technique using a layered stencil. This is a great way to add a touch of elegance to your cards with minimal effort.
I'm using the Sweet Bouquet stamp, and one way to make a really fast design is to use what I like to call a pre-prepared bouquet. And being able to stamp a full bouquet in one stamp makes it very fast and easy. Having the coordinating stencils, these layering stencils, makes a big difference as well. If you want some speedy but beautiful cards, these are really good options. And what a great technique to have up your sleeve. Now I'm using my stamp wheel here, just kind of tweaking the position of this bouquet to enable me to be able just to flip the stamp around on the stamp wheel, and in 2 stamps have an area that I can use to create a panel for the front of my card. I like to initially stamp my images with like a permanent black ink, but you could use a pigment ink if you prefer. And if you do use that, then maybe just hit it with the heat tool or wait a few minutes for the pigment ink to dry before you do your ink blending. Now this set of coordinating stencils is a layering set, and I love these layering sets of stencils from Altenew because they do give you lots of options. I'm actually leaving my image within the mat so that the stencil kind of sticks to the photopolymer layer, the grid layer, and I'm going to show you a little trick with this a little bit later on in the video, so hold on for that. But with these stencils you get lots of options because you can either partially ink blend, you can multicolor ink blend, you can layer ink blend. I've even watercolored through stencils as well. There are so many different ways to get a variety of looks for your flowers. Today I'm keeping it really simple. I am changing up my colors a little bit to get some more depth in these flowers. I'm only using 2 layers on each flower today. I did initially use my larger ink blending tool, but I didn't actually mask off enough areas. So then I learnt from my mistake and switched out to the smaller ink blending tool. And this is what I mean by changing up and getting a different look. So the first flower, I actually used the darker color that I did the second layer for the base color of the second flower. I hope that makes sense. So it means what I've done is I've got a lighter and a darker flower on each of my bouquets, yet I've kept the same colors throughout. And I will list all the colors that I've used today at the blog, and I'll have that linked in the description below this video. One of the things I love about this particular stamp set is the way that the leaves layer. It's actually got, instead of doing almost like a natural shadow, only half of the leaf is blended out with the second layer, and I just chose a nice dark green to go with that, and it looks really bold and beautiful. But of course you can blend it or color it however you please. And the reason that I left my cardstock in the stamp wheel, or the main reason, was that I wanted to restamp it with my pigment ink, and by doing that it meant that it just crisps up the edges. This obsidian ink has that real bold black finish, and it just does really bring your image to life. So if you've got a stamp positioning tool, this is a go-to technique that I think you will really like. Once you start doing it, you can't stop. I cut the panel down and added some foam tape, popped it up on the center of a A2 side fold card, and then added a sentiment from the One Go birthday greetings, which is heat embossed on some jet black cardstock. This is a great sentiment set because one stamp and one die cut gives you a stack of birthday sentiments. I love it. And I added a butterfly from the Meadow Reflections set, which I had left over, I say that in inverted commas, from another card I made.
Number 4, Magic Effects with Water. For those who love a little bit of texture, Jenny's Magic Effects with Water is a must try. She uses panel ink blending and stencils to mask off areas before spritzing with water, creating a unique and mesmerizing effect.
Today I'm featuring this little guy. It's the Fine Mister, or Mr. Fine, complete with his little bow tie. I love this. It sprays a super fine mist of water, and the well is really big, so you don't have to keep going back and refilling it when you're creating and having a long crafting session. I'm going to feature it on all 3 cards today, and all of my cards are going to start off with a heavily inked background. So I'm using dark colored ink for this technique. I find that works the best. You can try any color of ink you like, but my preference is for the darker ink because you get more of a contrast. And I'm going to use my large ink blending tool and fully ink blend that panel of Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock. Once that's fully inked, I'm going to overlay my stencil of choice. This is the woven stencil over the top and secure it in place with some satin masking tape. And once that's secured in place, I'm going to grab Mr. Fine, my Fine Mister, and add maybe 2 or 3 mists of water over the top. Not too many, you don't want the water to run and seep under the stencil, but just enough so that you get a good layer. And before I lift up that stencil, I'm going to overlay with a paper towel just to pick up the excess that's on top of that stencil so it doesn't drip off when I remove the stencil.
I'm then going to carefully peel back the stencil without shifting it, and ta-da! It's amazing. You see why I want to use dark ink. So I'm using Rhodolite here, which is one of the newer ink releases, and you can speed up the drying time if you want with a heat tool. And to finish off this card, I'm going to keep this pretty masculine. It's a dark coloured ink and a sort of pretty neutral stencil, so I thought, why not go with splatters? I'm adding some pure white ink spray, some orange cream metallic ink spray, because I don't think I've ever used this colour on a card, and I thought it would just be a really nice pop of colour for a birthday card for a guy or a gal. And also some antique gold metallic ink spray. So all of those colours together worked really well with that rhodolite. And isn't it cool how that water just lifts up the ink and it gives you that sort of second colour and perfectly creates that stenciled background. For my sentiment, I'm using the Just a Number die. This has a coordinating stamp set with lots of sentiments in it, but I'm just featuring the die today. It's a shadow outline, which I've die cut from vellum, and I'm layering over the top with jet black cardstock. I did do a couple of layers there with some glue, and then I'm going to mount it on some thin strips of foam tape right into the center and just leave it at that, pop it onto a note card.
3 unique card making backgrounds. Moving on to colouring techniques, Jaycee demonstrates a fun and easy method using woodless watercolour pencils. Simply scrape the colour onto your paper, spritz with water to create beautiful watercolour washes. Number 6.
So what I'm going to start with first is the 9x12 watercolor paper pad. And I like to cut the sheets down to quarters, so roughly 6 inches by 4.5 inches. The next thing you'll need is the watercolor pencil, woodless watercolor pencils. This is a 24 set. And of course, these colors coordinate with your existing Altenew color stash. And just as before, I'm going to pull a rainbow array of colors from this set. So I'll start with Coral Bliss. And what I'm going to do is take a regular pair of scissors and open them so that the blade is exposed. Or one of the knives in the mixed media palette knife set, which is what I'm going to do for this card. And what I'm going to do is scrape this color off of the woodless watercolor pencil. So woodless meaning that the entire pencil itself contains the watercolor pigment. So I've got a fine dusting of Coral Bliss on the top left corner of my card. And then I'll just go in order. So I'll pick up Heartbeat. And I'll do the same thing. I'm going to slightly overlap this color on top of Coral Bliss. And of course, the more pigment you apply to your watercolor paper, the more vibrant your end results will be. Then I'll move on to Maple Yellow, then Grass Field. And if you don't have the Altenew Mixed Media palette set, you could also just use your regular pencil sharpener and keep the shavings in a bowl or something. And then you can use your fingers and almost sprinkle it on top of your watercolor panel. I'm applying a little bit of Mountain Mist, then Turquoise, then finally Lavender Fields, and Rubellite. So I've got that color cascading from top left to bottom right corner. The next thing I'll grab is the iridescent Altenew ink spray. This ink spray will add a wonderful light layer of shine to this background. Now before I spray this directly onto my watercolor paper, I am going to do a little test spray just to make sure I have the ink flowing. And then pretty high up, I'm going to add this to my background, and you'll see that this will resuspend the woodless watercolor pigment. So I've added that quite liberally to my background. I'm going to very carefully lift and gently move this pigment on my watercolor panel. And this is why I like to use the larger panels of watercolor cardstock, so that I can cut out the corners that will get really muddy from the colors touching each other a lot, and then you'll get like a mix of brown, for example. And if I feel I need more concentration of color in certain areas, like I've lost a little bit of the red up here, just have to take the pencil again And while the paper is still wet, just gently scrape a little bit more pigment onto my watercolor paper. So again, I've used the iridescent ink spray to resuspend the woodless watercolor pencil pigment. And I'll lift it and move it around just to get a really nice mix. Okay, so I like the concentration of color on my background here. Now I can put this back onto my stamping mat and use my heat tool to quickly dry off this watercolor panel. So now that my background is dry, I can go ahead and trim off the excess to an A2 size card front. So that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So here's my trimmed watercolor background on my folded note card base. And you can see that I got rid of those muddy corners. And to keep this arrangement really simple, I decided to use a really small stamp set. This is the Mini Delight birthday banner. And of course, all Mini Delights come with their coordinating dies. And off camera, I went ahead and made the focal point to this card, which was just this stamped banner in black ink, stamped onto some scrap white cardstock. I double foam mounted the main banner right in the center of my cardstock, and then I adhered the tail end pieces around the center banner. And then I finished this card with a few satin gold sequins around my main sentiments. And that finishes this second really easy background to make, of course in an array of rainbow colors as well. But this looks great in monochrome, and you can go ahead and stamp on top of this for even more interest around your sentiment banners or other sentiment die cuts.
Number 6. Quick and easy alcohol ink on Yupo. For those who enjoy alcohol inks, Michelle Short shows how to create vibrant tags using Yupo paper. This technique is perfect for beginners and produces stunning results.
I have picked out various different colours of artist alcohol markers. I will have all of the individual colours that I used and the sets listed over on the Altenew blog. But I just kind of picked them randomly. I didn't actually check to make sure that they would work well together or anything. I really just picked them randomly from my sets. I just wanted to go for like a rainbow kind of effect. And I have a piece of Yupo paper here that's just about big enough to cut my tag from, and I've used some satin masking paper, and I'm just sticking that down to a piece of grid paper. That's going to help me try and have the lines that I add on top with the markers straight. To be honest with you, I'm not too concerned with it being perfectly straight, but I wanted to try and have them sort of as straight as possible, like not really kind of really wonky, but you could definitely do that. I think that would look really nice as well, and also diagonal, and then you wouldn't have to worry if they were straight or anything at all. So I'm using the brush tip of the marker, and I'm just going through and adding lines onto the Yupo paper. And what is great is that if you kind of add them kind of like straight on and don't sort of go over them multiple times, it kind of blends into the Yupo paper like alcohol ink do. But if you're going to go over them lots of different times, you get kind of like a lined look, and I really like that look. It's kind of a little bit, I don't want to say messy because it's not messy, but it's a bit kind of organic, and I just really happen to like how they kind of look on Yupo paper. They don't blend massively well, but I didn't really need them to blend that well either. But I am kind of going through and sort of, when I add one colour and then I add the next colour, then I'm kind of sort of trying to blend them out a little bit in between the two shades. It works better with some colours than other colours, and if I'm going in with a lighter shade after a darker one, I do just kind of blend the tip off onto that scrap paper so that I can get rid of any of the excess ink off of that, and it comes off really easily. So like I said, I'm just going through kind of like the rainbow colours here, and I've got that purple there, and I didn't think in the end that it blended with that blue very nicely. It kind of went a little bit grey. So after I add this last colour here at the bottom, I do go back in and go over that with the darker blue. I didn't really like how that ended up, but the great thing with Yupo paper and alcohol markers is that you can just go over it and it completely covers it, so that's really nice. And then I do just want to go back in with the other shades just to try and blend it out slightly. But like I said, I do really like that kind of look with the lines, and some of them dry out a little bit more than others as the alcohol kind of evaporates from the paper, and some of them stay a bit more crisp, so it's quite nice just to have that variation. I think it looks a little bit like waves maybe in a sea. I think this would look really nice as like ombre colours. You could do like all shades of blue or aqua or something like that, but I thought I would go with a really nice bright rainbow for a birthday tag. And the great thing about alcohol markers is that they dry really quickly on Yupo paper. So I'm going to take the Terrific Tags dies, and I'm taking one of the larger tags, and I'm going to cut that from the Yupo paper. If you didn't actually want to do this technique on the Yupo paper, you could do it on cardstock, and then you would get more of a blended look, and that's just a slightly different look, but it would work out kind of the same way. You just wouldn't get those lines. So I'm adhering that down with some low tack tape, running that through my die cutting machine, and then I've got my rainbow tag here. I then wanted to personalise the tag, and so I thought that I would take one of the mega number dies. This is the 8, as you can see here, and I'm going to cut that from the tag, and that's so that I can send it to someone that is celebrating their 8th birthday. So again, I'm just adhering that down with some low tack tape, and then I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine. And then I can just pop out those pieces, and I do want to keep all of the pieces that has come out, the inside of the number, as well as the positive and the negative. And I think this on its own just looks really nice. I think that would look lovely just on a card, but I am going to add it back into the tag. So I've cut another of the tags from a Classic Crest Solar White £110 cardstock, and I'm going to add some glue tape onto the back of the piece that I coloured with the alcohol markers. And I like to use kind of dry adhesive with Yupo paper. I find that it personally works the best for me. So I'm just going to adhere those down. That's going to give some stability to the tag. Also, it's going to help when I add the number 8 back in, and also it would be nice on the back of the tag to write a personal message as well. I've then cut 5 more of the mega number 8 die from Classic Crest Solar White £110 cardstock, and I'm going to stack those one on top of each other to give some dimension. So I'm going to use the 2-in-1 precision glue pen here and just adhere them all on top of each other. I could have cut them and added some double-sided adhesive sheet onto the back of it, but these numbers are quite large, so I thought I would just go ahead and use that glue pen. And you have got a little bit of wiggle room there as well, just to kind of make sure that they're stacked on top of each other nicely. So then I've got those 5 stacked there, but I'm just going to take the 8 letter itself, and I'm just going to use that as a guide so that I can pop in those inside pieces first. It's a little bit easier if you're doing it when it's just one layer of Yupo or cardstock, rather than that kind of bulkier 5 layers. So I can just pop those in, and I'm just using that glue tape there as well to stick those down. And then I can just pop that 8 back out. And then I can add some 2-in-1 precision glue pen onto the back of that white cardstock piece, and then I can pop that inside, and that's just going to pop in like a puzzle piece. And I do think it looks really nice just with the white cardstock, but I am going to add the alcohol inked piece on top, and so that it kind of completes it as an eclipse look. I really love doing eclipse technique. I think it just works with so many different designs, and it kind of just pops out of the tag. I just think it looks really nice all popped up like that. I do want to add a sentiment on the tag, so I'm taking the Mini Delight Birthday Banner sentiment, and this reads Happy Birthday to You. So I'm going to stamp it down onto some black cardstock using the Mini Misty. So I'm just going to prep the cardstock with an anti-static powder tool, remove any excess powder, and then I can ink up the stamp with embossing ink. This is a clear sticky ink so that the embossing powder that I add on top is going to stick to it. So I'm just being really careful here to stamp that down. It's a very small sentiment. And then I can apply some pure white crisp embossing powder. I like to apply it a few times, tap off the excess, and then I can heat set that until it's completely melted. And then once it's cooled down, I'm going to cut that down into a strip. I'm then taking some instant dimension foam tape, and I'm going to add a small amount of that onto the back of the sentiment piece. So I'm just cutting that down with some scissors. And then because the 8 is popped up and this is going to go over 2 different levels, I do want to add an extra piece of the instant dimension foam tape into where the centre of that 8 is. So I can just add a small amount of that onto the back of the piece that I've already added on. So that piece there will be 2 layers thick. And then I can just remove the backing, and then I can stick that down onto the tag. I'm then just going to add some twine through the top of the tag. So I'm just popping it through, tying it at the front, and then I can tie that in a bow. And then once I'm happy with that, I can just take some scissors and cut the tails down. And then I did want to embellish the tag slightly, so I'm taking the Sentiment Banners cover die, and there is some stars in this die, and I'm going to cut them from Dazzling Diamond Glitter cardstock. So I've just taken a sheet of that, and then I can cut that down. I just need a fairly small strip, because I only need to cut the stars. I'm not going to cut the banners as well. So I can just stick that down, and then I can run that through my die cutting machine. And then I've got 3 stars here so that I can add them onto my tag. And I thought it would just add a nice embellishment. I did think about adding enamel dots or something like that, but I thought the stars and kind of like the glitter would make it a little bit more special for a birthday. So I'm just adding a small amount of liquid glue onto the back of those stars, and then I can stick those down onto the tag. Let me know in the comments if you tried this technique before of adding alcohol markers onto Yupo paper. I think it's a really quick and easy way to add colour onto a background in particular, and I think it's a little bit less messy and slightly more controlled than alcohol inks themselves. So that's the tag finished for today. I think it's a really nice kind of bright tag for a child's birthday, but you could definitely do this with any kind of age number as well.
Number 7. Easy card idea to brighten anyone's day. Erum demonstrates a simple yet effective wet on wet watercolouring technique. It's a great way to add a touch of artistry to your cards.
This is another very quick and simple card, though the drying time on this is the only thing that will take you a little bit of time. So what I did is, while I was waiting for this panel to dry, I just did a couple of chores around the house and also had my lunch. So you start by adding water to the A2 watercolor cardstock. On the left hand side, you can choose to apply water anywhere you want, where you want to add color. Once you have the water, and I added a lot of water because I want a very flowy feeling, I'm going to drop in purple pigment. I'm going to spread it around, just how I want my panel to look, how my design to appear at the end. And then I will also drop in some blue pigment because these colors look great together. I'm not going to overwork this pigment. I am, however, going to add splotches of both purple and blue. Next, while it's still very wet, I will take the Dotted Waves stencil. You can use any stencil you want. I will place the stencil carefully over the wet panel, And I'm not going to move this now. The next thing that I will do is I will place the slip plate of my stamp wheel onto the panel and place some heavy items over it. So because we need the pressure in order to get the stencil design. So I went and had my food, I did some chores around the house, fed my cats, and now I'm going to show you how it looks. It's the reveal time, and look at that. Doesn't it look beautiful? The texture on there is lovely. Now what I'm going to do is just dry the panel completely so that I can add a few black splatters. Next, I used halftone hearts nesting die, and I die cut a heart out of Dazzling Diamonds cardstock. And I also have a sentiment stamped and die cut here with me. All I'm going to do is place these together with instant dimension foam tape on my card front. I also added a bit of silver string behind my arrangement so that it completes the look. If you have made these panels in advance, it's a quick card to put together.
Easy, but with advanced tools. Now let's explore some more easy ideas, but for crafters with more access to advanced tools. Number 8, Simple Autumn Wreath. Myself, Lydia Evans, chose this beautiful Simple Autumn Wreath card. While it involves easy colouring of an outline image, it also requires a die cutting machine for the 3D embossing to add dimension. Here is the Blossom Wreath from Old to New, and this is the set that we're going to be using. I'm going to start off first with the outline for this set, and I'm just going to pop that onto an acrylic block and then stamp that into place onto a piece of white cardstock using some obsidian ink. It is my favourite ink of all time. So once I've done that, I then found it easiest to kind of work with the leaves in this set. So I'm just going to pop them into place onto the wreath, and for the leaves I am going to be using the Sea Forest. Now if you're wondering why these leaves do come in 2 separate bits, it's because we wanted to keep the size of the wreath as it was, so we didn't want to kind of waste the space. So by cutting these little elements down, we were able to then keep the wreath the size we wanted to. So I'm then going to pop in the second part of the leaves for the wreath, just popping them into place, picking them up on my block and then stamping them again using the Sea Forest ink. I'm then going to move on to the flower portion of this blossom wreath, and for this one I am going to be using the Canyon clay ink. So as you can see, we're using really kind of muted autumny fall colours for this one here to create more of an autumnal look instead of a spring look. So once I have those into place, I'm then going to move on to the little blossom pieces. Now again, these are split into a number of little pieces on the stamp set just so we could keep this wreath as large as it is. So for these pieces of blossom, I am going to be using the pumpkin pie ink. So we have 2 kind of big pieces for this, and then we have 1 singular little blossom that you could use for all of the little pieces if you wanted to. I then wanted to add a little bit more shading and depth and interest to this, so I am going to be taking my woodless watercolour pencils from Old to New just to add a little bit of shading to the base of these images. So for the beautiful little leaves that we have here, I'm just going to take the Sicilian amber colour and I'm just going to add that just to the base of the leaves, kind of scribbling in the colour. It's not perfect, but it does look good. I'm then going to move on to the yellow ochre that we have, and I'm just going to add some of that darker shading just to the kind of base of the blossom. And then for the little flowers that we have, the smaller and the larger one, I am going to be using the Coral Bliss pencil just to add a deeper shading to the base of all of those little buds that we have there. So once I'm done with that, I then wanted to kind of fill the wreath in a little bit more. So I'm going to take the orange cream and I'm just kind of adding little dots in between all of the little spaces. So where there's a little space on the wreath, I kind of just added a little dot with my pencil just to fill it up and make it more autumny. Once that's done, I'm then ready to die cut it. So I do have the coordinating die from the blossom wreath, and I'm just going to pop that into place around the wreath, add a little bit of tape, then run that through on my machine. The tape does help it stop moving around when you run it through, so you're going to be able to cut it perfectly. I'm then going to take the Charming Mandala 3D embossing folder, and I've just embossed a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 piece of white cardstock. I then decided I want a little bit of a border around the outside edge. So I'm just going to pop that into my trimmer and then take 1/4 of an inch off all of the sides, so the top, the bottom, the left and the right as well. So once I have all of those kind of trimmed, I then have my little panel ready to go onto my card base. So my card base is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I am going to add the emboss panel onto this using some foam tape, making sure that I have the border kind of equal all the way around that. Once that's done, I can then add a little bit more dimension with some more foam tape. So I'm just going to add little pieces around that die cut wreath that we have. And then once that's all in place, I can remove the backing and then pop that into position on my card base. I kind of wanted to add a banner sentiment to this, so I am going to be using the Mini Delight birthday banner for this one. So I'm going to stamp 2 of the large banner border pieces onto a piece of white cardstock, again using obsidian. And then I'm going to add the little banner pieces onto one of them. So I only need to do it on one, not both of them this time. Again with the obsidian. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to add my sentiment again from the Mini Delight into the one that doesn't have the banner edges on. Once that's done, I can then fussy cut these out. So I'm going to fussy cut around the one with the edges on because I don't have the die for this one, just leaving a small kind of border around the outside edge. And I can then take the coordinating die for the Mini Delight and pop that around the banner piece and run that through my die cutting machine. Once that's done, I'm going to layer these together to create a kind of dimensional banner look. So I'm just going to add some foam tape behind the smaller one of the banners, the one with the sentiment on, pop that onto the one that has the banner pieces on, take another piece of foam tape and add that behind the layered little piece that we have here. Once that's done, I'm just going to pop that into place onto my card, and here is the card complete. I really do hope that you like the card and that you've enjoyed the video as well. If you do create a card that was inspired by this, it would be great if you do share because we would truly love to see. Number 9, foil all the things. Jenny demonstrates a stunning hot foiling technique. She foils pattern paper and then stamps a sentiment on top, creating a luxurious and elegant card. It's quick and easy as long as you have a hot foil machine handy.
I'm using patterned paper. This is the Summer Garden Paper Pack. Most of the patterned paper from Altenew is really thick and smooth, so it's great for foiling on. And this time I'm going to use matte silver foil, and I want to make sure I get a good impression. I get it exactly where I want it. On those first 2 cards I was kind of haphazard. It didn't really matter where the sunburst appeared on the medium that I was using. This time I do mind. I want it exactly in the corner over those florals. So I'm first going to add a little hinge using washi tape just to make sure I have that foil in the right place. Slip the foil underneath and then adhere it down with some more washi and then flip it over. So you saw exactly perfectly foiled in the right place. So we're going to finish off our cards. I'm keeping them clean and simple is the name of the game for this video. I just wanted to give you some inspiration on how to use your plates, but you can go, you know, super complicated if you want. I wanted to keep it pretty clean and simple. So I'm using this just a number sentiment set. I've lined up one of the sentiments that fits underneath the sunburst doily impression on this pattern paper that I've trimmed down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 with the pattern directly in the center at the top. And then this sentiment, I've stamped it with obsidian pigment ink, and I'm going to do just that.
Number 10, 3 unique card making backgrounds. Jaycee returns with another amazing technique, rainbow masking and stencil on stencil. This technique requires a die cutting machine to replicate the look and create intricate designs that are easy to implement.
Collection of stencils. So the first item I wanted to showcase is the fairly old watercolor stripes stencil. Onto my Crafter's Essential stamping mats, I'm going to get a rough placement of where I want the stencil to go. And on here I want to try to create a light drop shadow. So once I have a rough placement of where I want this to go, I'm going to lower it slightly down and over to the right and tape down my stencil to my craft mat. I'm going to take a really light gray ink. I'll use Morning Frost from the Warm Gray family of inks. And in my small ink blending tool set, I have 2 of the sets of 4 so that I encompass all of the colors, a brown and a black. And I'll apply a barely visible layer of this ink. The majority of this is going to be covered up, so I'm not so concerned about getting this really even. However, I do want a fairly defined edge, so this is okay for me. Now, since I have enough real estate to create a rainbow array of colors on my background here, and all of the ink blending tools that coordinate with that, I'll go ahead and make this a rainbow striped background. But before I do that, I will pick up my stencil again. So I'm going to recenter my stencil on top of my card front. Alright, so now my stencil is back in the original orientation that I had planned before. And for this layer, I want intense saturation to try to cover up the gray that I have behind these exposed areas. So I'm working in Pink Pearl first, then Heartbeat, then Orange Cream, Warm Sunshine, Grass Field, Lagoon, Persian Blue, Deep Iris, and finally Pinkalicious. So you'll see I haven't put anything away yet because I'll need it for the second step. But before I do that, I'm just going to take a quick peek at what this looks like. Okay, good. So I have a nice little drop shadow underneath each of the stripes, and each layer has adequate saturation and a defined edge. So I like that. I'm going to replace the stencil. I'm going to amp up the look of this stencil and tie it with another crafty item for this card. The next stencil I'll be using on this background is the Milky Way stencil, which is a star layering stencil. These images fit within this one. And without removing the watercolor stripes stencil, I'm going to overlay the Milky Way stencil on top. Actually, I'll use the larger images, just so that they show really nicely through the other stencil. Once I've picked an orientation that I like, I'll tape this stencil down, and I will repeat the stenciling steps as I did before, but this time I'm moving on to a darker color on top of the previous layer. So in the first layer on top, I used Pink Pearl, so now I'll move to Coral Bliss, then Vineyard Berry, then Autumn Blaze, Caramel Toffee, and I'm going to move my image now, and hopefully you can see the effect that I'm getting. I've repositioned my stencil, so now there's just a continuous flow of the stars. So I'll move on to the next darkest layer of green. So I used Green Field, I'll use Shadow Creek. On this next layer for the green area of the watercolor stripes stencil. Then I used Emerald for the blue-green layer, Sapphire for the blue layer, Midnight Violet for the purple layer, and finally Razzleberry for this last red-violet layer. So now I can reveal this layer. Before I remove this, I'm going to do a little bit of ink bleaching. To do this, I'm just adding a little bit of water to my craft mat and a clean water brush. And I'm just adding splatters to this ink, just to push the dye ink into my white cardstock. And I like this because it lets me add splatter without taking away from a lot of the white space in this background. This is my finished rainbow background. It's got the drop shadow from the gray ink, a nice array of colors from the watercolor stripe stencil, and also the added double exposure from the Milky Way stencil for the stars. There's obviously a lot to notice and pick up on this background, so I'm going to keep the focal point really simple on this card. So here's my dried background. Like I said, I thought the star motifs were going to work well with the focal element of my card front. So off camera, I used the Splatter Constellations stamp and die set to cut out a little Splatter Aquarius constellation image. I figured by the time this video publishes, it's going to be Aquarius season. But before I assemble this card and stamp the Happy Birthday Aquarius sentiment, I figured it'd be nice to break up the continuity of this background by raising it up a little bit. So I'm going to take the deckled edge die that's in Mix and Match Frames die set and cut this deckled edge out of the center of my striped background. So after using the mix and match frames die set to raise the watercolor stripes panel off of the card, I added the Happy Birthday Aquarius sentiment and the die cut Splatter Aquarius constellation onto my card front, and finished this card with essential black and white enamel dots, just the white ones, around my card. So this is just an easy way to add a little bit more interest and tie in your focal point into your stenciled background.
We hope that these 10 birthday card ideas inspire you to get crafting. Remember, the most important thing is to have fun and enjoy the process. Happy crafting!
Hey there, Lydia here. I really do hope that you've just enjoyed the video. If so, please subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, turn on the notification bell so you can get your daily dose of crafty techniques and tutorials just like this. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.